Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
And welcome to Ricki's Kitchen. We are on USA Global TV and Radio. And welcome to USA Global TV. It's one of those days. It's a Friday. I am Ricki Mckenna. I am a certified nutritionist and a chef and an author. And I will forthwith show you my book. Wherever you are in the world, you may order this on Amazon. Yes, you can eat well and eat right. So it's filled with all sorts of nutritional information, fun stuff for kids, and information on different kinds of foods, and about 30 recipes. So have fun. And today on USA Global TV's United Kitchens, we are going to unite spinach and ricotta cheese and Parmesan cheese and several other things. And we're going to be making what I call unfrumply dumplings. They're spinach and ricotta dumplings. And if I mispronounce ricotta, excuse me, I speak Spanish and not Italian. So at any rate, welcome, and here we go. I've got about a pound of fresh spinach, and it's the kind that comes in a package that's already washed. When you use fresh spinach and you have the long, fresh, wonderful spinach leaves, take the stems off and then wash them. And then rinse them off carefully and use the water, shake them off, and use just that water in a pan to cook them. We'll just wilt this down. I'm going to turn my pan on to high to start, but I'm using a cast iron skillet, and I'm going to carefully, I hope, put the spinach in here. And you can see it's piled up pretty high. Okay. And I've got even more, but I wanted you to see the volume of spinach that we'll be using and watch what happens to it. Most of us know what happens when you put spinach into a pan with a little bit of water. It doesn't need a lot. So I'm just going to put in maybe a couple of tablespoons of water. That's plenty. And you'll see what we'll do with the water later, because we're going to have our dumplings in that water, and they're going to poach in the hot water in the same pan. That's the advantage of using one pan. You can do everything in one pan. I'm going to cover this and get it started. Let me show you that just for fun. I think I can put this on top. We'll just for fun, we'll bring it over there and show you how this looks. And remember, I'm a chef and not a techie, so let's make sure I get this right. Okay, you can see how much is in that pan. Is completely filled, and I'm going to put this much more on it. I can hear it starting to sizzle, which means the water is beginning to boil. Oh boy. I do have a larger pan, but this is the one I chose for today. And you'll be amazed at how much it shrinks. And I'm actually going to turn the heat down a little bit to medium high because all of a sudden it will happen. So there's our great big volume of spinach. And now come on back. And here we are. So in the meantime, we're going to let the spinach wilt. Again, I put it down to medium high so it doesn't burn because the cast iron skillets retain a lot of heat. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is chop my Parmesan cheese into smaller pieces because this calls for grated. So I'm going to grate it a little bit more, actually chopping it up by hand. And I had it's grated, but not fine enough. I want it finer to mix a little bit more easily with the recipe. So I'm just chopping through it and making sure that all those long and skinny pieces are now little skinny pieces. And we're going to just give that a little bit more. Okay. Just make sure that it's all chopped up pretty well because it will mix better that way with this recipe. And then we will take in some flour and put that with some ricotta cheese. Actually, what I'm going to do is wait for the spinach so we can see how it looks. By the way, if you're using, as I said, if you're using the fresh spinach, the leaves, make sure that you shake them off fairly well. You can see this beginning to shrink now. And that they are completely clean. And if I may, I would advise organic spinach because I know that in the United States, unfortunately, spinach is highly sprayed with pesticides and insecticides and herbicides and so forth. So that I definitely would recommend buying organic spinach only, among other things. And right now, blueberries and cherries are in season. And so I'm not sure if cherries are on the list, but I know that spinach is definitely on the list of highly sprayed vegetables and fruits. And that comes from the Environmental Works Group, which you can contact online. It's ewg.org. And so take a look at what they recommend. We're going to get our bowl ready to put the spinach in, but I want you to see how tiny it will come out. And you can either use a blender or I just hand chop it once it's done. And it is definitely going in the pan. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is get our herb butter ready. I'm going to make some herb butter to go over to dunk the dumplings into once we get them cooked. Then we roll them in a little bit of wonderfully delicious and tasty herb butter because there's not a lot of seasonings that I use in the dumplings. It's just basically spinach, ricotta, salt and pepper, and some eggs. So let's let this start to melt. I'm going to use a little bit more, because you can always use herb butter on other things as well. It's great on a wonderful piece of crusty French bread or even just a gluten-free piece of bread that you want to have toasted. You can use herb butter on it. Oh my, our spinach is definitely shrinking. I'm going to turn it down a little bit so we don't have any burning. Here we go. And I'm going to give that a little scoop. Oh my. Actually, I'm going to turn it off. I don't know if you can see the smoke, the steam coming out of it. I'm going to leave the top on for a couple more seconds there while we melt our butter. And I'm going to make my herb butter today with chopped rosemary because the spinach will have, you can use oregano. It's absolutely delicious with this. You can use fresh oregano or dried oregano. I have fresh rosemary that I began to chop yesterday. It's about roughly a tablespoon. And so I will give that just a little bit more chop up, just to make sure that it's as fine as we can do it. And of course, when you chop an herb, it releases all the wonderful aromas and the oils from it. And so here we have a beautiful tablespoonful of fresh rosemary from my garden. And you can certainly buy fresh rosemary and do that yourself. Here we go. All right, and I'm going to take my tablespoon of rosemary and bring it over to my butter, which has just melted beautifully. Add a little tiny bit of kosher salt and some pepper. Here we go. And our spinach is just about ready. So I'm going to give the herb butter a little mix. And turn that way down to low so it stays warm. I'm using a pan that retains heat, so it really doesn't need to be turned down a lot. I'm going to add a pinch of salt. Maybe 2. And let that dissolve in there. Okay, and we'll bring you over and you can see how much the spinach has reduced, as well as how the herb butter looks, which is really lovely. Remember that big old pile of spinach? Well, it's now a little pile, so we'll take that off. And here's our herb butter. You can see I put in the butter and then added the rosemary, and oh my goodness, the aroma is fantastic. So I'm just going to leave that. Actually, I'm going to turn it off for now because the pan does retain heat. And I'm going to take, by the way, I'm a gadget lover. And I want to show you something. If you don't have one of these, please think about investing in it. It's a cover for your handles. And it's, I believe it's silicone. And it protects your hand. It also makes it easier to grip a heavy pan. So I'm going to put it right over the handle of my cast iron pan and move it over here. And I'm going to take my spinach. There it is. And I'm going to pour it carefully. It's going to come out in one big blob. Here we go. Into a strainer. And take the rest of the spinach with it, because we're going to use this pan again to poach our dumplings. Okay. And we'll get the water in there now so it gets heated. Okay. All right. Now you can see, you can use a potato masher, or actually I'm going to use my slotted spoon and press as much of the water out of the spinach as I can. You can see it dripping. That was just about a pound of spinach, which comes down to nothing when you wilt it. Look at that, lots of water. And it's a good thing I didn't add any more water. As I said, when you're doing the fresh spinach, this spinach, it needs just a couple of tablespoons, which is what I added. And if you're using the fresh spinach, just use the remaining water on the leaves after you've washed it. Okay. And now we're going to take the water out and put the spinach in there for just a second. So I'm going to move my cheese over. because I want to chop the spinach. We're going to take it now and chop it up finely so that it'll work into our dumplings. And of course, it's easy to chop, but you want to go in several different directions so that you make sure it's finely chopped. If you don't, it's going to work beautifully in this. And there we go. So now we have, that's a whole pound of spinach down to practically what looks like practically nothing. And I'll tell you what else I'm going to do. I'm going to take a paper towel and take a little more of the moisture out of it as well. There we go. Okay. Ooh, hot. And of course, we're not going to leave the paper towel in it. I'm just going to sop up some more of the moisture. Here we go. Perfect. All right. I just wanted to get a little more of that moisture out. Actually, I must say that the potato masher works a lot better than the spoon does. So if you have a hand potato masher, that's a really good tool to use to get the moisture out. And I'm just going to chop right through it one more time. Okay, and now we'll put it in the bowl. So remember, I've got about a pound of spinach in here. You can use a pound or you can use 2. Depends on how many people you're feeding, how many dumplings you want to make. This will make quite a bit of dumplings. You'll be amazed at how many dumplings we get from this. And again, I'm going to use a little paper towel there, or whatever you like to use to clean up things. There we go. Okay, now we're going to take, I have a big fork that I like for mixing, so I'm going to separate the spinach and I'm going to put my flour in. I've got about 3/4 of a cup of gluten-free flour, and actually I have made these with using a combination of regular flour and almond flour, which really does add just a little bit of wonderful flavor into it. There we go. But this time I chose just the gluten-free flour because we have vegetarians in the group and people who are sensitive to gluten. So therefore, this should work beautifully for them. Go. And actually, you really can't tell the difference in the taste. But the almond flour, if you use solely almond flour, may add just a little bit of a nutty kind of flavor, which would be marvelous. As I say, I think it was about 2/3 regular flour and 1/3 almond flour, and the flavor was fine. We're going to add a little, I'm just picking up all the flour that sticks to the bowl. There we go. I think you can see that. And I'm going to add a little bit of, just a teeny bit of granulated garlic, just because I like it. That's up to you. I've made the dumplings before without the garlic. And make sure you mix it in thoroughly when you do add your spices or salt and pepper. Okay, it smells divine, actually. Okay, and now, one of the suggestions is to take this mixture, once I get it all together, I'm going to put 2 eggs in. And thoroughly mix those in. You can beat them a little bit before you add them, which is a good idea sometimes. They'll work in beautifully this way. And what I'm seeing is that I may have to add a little bit more flour. This is pretty juicy. And I haven't added the ricotta cheese yet, which I will do very shortly. But I want to thoroughly mix in the egg. I actually cheated a little bit on the flour. I didn't put in as much as I usually do, but I think it's going to need it. Okay. Now I'm going to add a little bit of nutmeg, just a pinch. Actually, probably about a quarter teaspoon. Whoops, that's way too much. And when you don't have a sprinkle top on the jar, use the top of the jar to measure things. And the nutmeg just adds a little teeny subtle bit of flavor. And I think what I'm going to do is get my flour and add another couple of tablespoons of flour. And I keep my flour in glass jars. So we will grab a tablespoon at a time. Well, tablespoon and a half. And let's mix that up, because I think that'll give us a better consistency. And then we will add our ricotta cheese. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. It's quite thick, and that's what you want, because the cheese, both the cheeses, the ricotta and then the Parmesan, will add some more, especially the ricotta, moisture. I think we'll just add another little tablespoon. And thoroughly mix. You can use a whisk, or I prefer to use a large fork. It just seems to do a really good job of mixing. There we go. Now we're getting kind of sticky, which is what I wanted. You can see it's droppable. Now let's see what happens when I add the ricotta. Put this out of the way and add our ricotta cheese. Wonderfully flavorful and easy on the digestive system, I hope. And thoroughly mix that in. And then I'll add some salt and a little pepper. Salt does wondrous things when you're baking things. It seems to just help all the flavors come together. And of course, it does work as far as emulsifying things and bringing the flavors out in different foods. So there we go. I suppose if you wanted to use an electric mixer, you could, but this is much more fun and it's great exercise for your arm. So that's what I'm doing. Let's see. I want to see the consistency. I think we're going to add just a teeny bit more, but let's put our cheese in first. And I'm going to bring my water in the pan up to a boil, but first I want to take out a couple of the remaining spinach leaves. Here we go. Okay. And we're going to bring the water up to a boil. I'm going to put in a little bit of salt. A couple of pinches of salt. Mix it around a little tiny bit. And now we've added the eggs, the ricotta, and we are now going to put in the Parmesan. Ah, beautiful. I could eat it right now, but it's going to make the dumplings. So, and besides which, I'm not fond of raw flour. So I'm going to a little help here with my knife. Get the rest of the cheese in. And this is the Reggiano Parmesan. There we go. So basically we have a spinach ricotta flour batter. Right. Now, you can do this two ways. And I'm going to add a little bit more flour because what I'm going to do is drop them into the pan to cook. And they only take about 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to add a little salt first. That's about half a teaspoon. And maybe a tad more. There we go. And some pepper. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but one person in the audience mentioned something to me about the dirtiest place in the kitchen. And I thought, and I didn't get it. This is the dirtiest place in the kitchen. Every time you pick up a spice bottle or jar and you have dough on your hands or whatever it happens to be, it gets on the jar. So every once in a while now, about once a week, I go through my spice jars and just wipe them off with a little bit of a sponge and some disinfectant or something on them. Something that cleans them up. Okay, I think I'm going to add again a little bit more to the batter. Just another tablespoon because I wanted a teensy-weensy bit thicker. So again, you can add, or you can't subtract, but you can add. So you start with less and you can always add more. And here we go. And our water is coming up to a boil. So as soon as that gets to simmering, we'll start putting these in. Now you can do this in a couple of ways. I started to say that. If the batter is thick enough, you can wet your hands and roll little balls to make nice, even, almost, dumplings. But I'm a fan of let it create itself in the pan. So what I'm going to use is a spoon. And take a spoonful and just carefully pop it into the water and let it form. And I'll show you exactly how the finished ones look very shortly, as soon as we get these cooking. And I'm going to take a taste of this anyway because it smells divine. Oh yeah. This is truly wonderful comfort food. Especially once we get the warm herb butter on it. And our herb butter is just doing fine here. I'm going to turn it to low and just let it sit there warm. And our water is about to come up. And actually, after I tasted that, I would like a little more salt in mine. So I'm going to sprinkle a little bit more salt. This is personal taste, so you do it the way you want it. It's probably about a 1/4 teaspoon that I just added, but that can make a difference. And it will also help them cook better. I think what I was tasting also was the raw flour, which makes it kind of interesting. And as a nutritionist, this is not exactly something that I would recommend if you're trying to lose weight. However, every once in a while, we really have to have something that is comfort food. And to me, these dumplings are absolutely typical of wonderful, chewy consistency and comfort food. They're almost like a potato. I'm sure you've made potato gnocchis or dumplings before. And the chewy consistency of these is absolutely marvelous. So, comfort food. All right. So now we're ready. And our water's boiling, so we'll go over there and carefully put the dumplings in to cook. As soon as I can get us over there. There we go. As you can see, it's boiling. I'm going to take a tablespoon and you can see that I'm spacing them out. They're not going to spread out, but I don't want them to adhere to each other either. And we're going to have to do a couple of different pans full, but we'll work on this one first. Now, if you do put the dough in the refrigerator for about an hour before using it, of course, it'll be a little more firm. But you can see I can move them around. I think we can get a couple more in here. There we go. Okay, and it is definitely on high. And I'm going to time them to about 5 minutes. And then once they're done, I'm going to move them around a little bit so they're definitely cooking. And you don't want them to stick to the pan, so you want them floating, so they're poaching. You can see you have little guys floating around too, which is wonderful. Small tastes are always good. And just to show you how our butter looks, it's right here and it's ready to be used. Because you don't want to soak them in it, you just want to roll each one, as I'll show you, in the butter. And just for fun, I'll show you the finished product. I think you can see these. And I pulled some fresh basil out of my garden. And we'll come over here while those are poaching. And I don't know if you can see, but there is butter that's floating in there. And they do get to be almost like little meatballs, but of course it's not meatballs. And I'm going to taste this one. I had to turn it down a little because it was about to boil over. But there's our finished product, and they really are good. Now, I would have added a little more salt to this batch because that was my first batch, and I added a little bit. I prefer a little more salt, which you, of course, can always add after they're done. But they're absolutely delicious, and as I say, they're incredible comfort food. And if I were really decadent, I would take this forkful and dunk it in the butter, but I'm not going to do that. Here we go. Now, while that's working, and we have another couple of minutes, I'm going to make sure that they're rolling around and getting cooked on all sides, which they are. And they really don't need a lot of cooking. They need about, as I said, 4 to 5 minutes, depending on how small they are. A little bit, well, 2 to 3 minutes if they're really tiny. And of course, you can make them tiny. That's up to you. Or you can make them, cook them a little bit longer with, since I used a tablespoon to put them in here. And then what I'm going to do carefully, let's see, we've got another couple of minutes. You can use your judgment on this. And what I'd like to just share with you is a sandwich that I made yesterday. I made some pesto, and I used the traditional basil, but I used walnuts, and I used almonds, both, in my pesto, so that the pesto was a little bit different from normal, a traditional pesto, which uses pine nuts. So this pesto is fabulous. I added salt and I added some pepper and I added a little bit of lemon juice in addition to the olive oil and of course the cheese. And then what I do with my pesto is I take it and I spread it on a piece of bread. You can toast a piece of bread. Ciabatta bread is good, and a piece of Italian bread is wonderful. Take the pesto, spread it on the bread, and then I sliced avocados. Now, unfortunately, the avocados that I have this morning are not ripe enough to use. Otherwise, I would definitely show you because it makes a marvelous lunch, even just an open-faced sandwich like that. You take your pesto, spread it on the bread, cover that with avocado slices, and then slice up a little tomato. Put that on there, sprinkle it with salt and pepper. You don't need any more olive oil unless your pesto is really dry. I would just sprinkle it with some salt and pepper and enjoy. It's a marvelous flavor combination between the pesto, the avocados, and the tomato. It's so refreshing. Makes a marvelous sandwich. Okay, we're ready to take these out and put them in our butter. So I'm going to bring you back over. Yeah, actually, let's see. I know what we'll do. I'm going to carefully remove them, let all the water drip off, if you can, as much as possible. We'll take the moisture out. There we go. They just come out beautifully. I'm going to let the water boil because we'll put in another batch shortly. But these little guys are done. Okay. And now for the fun. I'm going to take my herb butter and actually put the pan on here because it's still quite hot. And get another bowl. And we'll make another wonderful rolled in the herb butter batch. Carefully taking each one. All you do is put it in there, roll it around once, and take it out. So that you're just giving them a little bit of the herb butter flavor. It kind of coats the outside. If you like, you can coat them a little bit more with the flour before you put them into boil or poach, and that will give them a little bit more of an outside flour. It brings it to a little bit different flavor and texture, but I happen to like them this way. And as you can see, I'm just rolling them around in there and placing them in a bowl, and basically they are ready to eat. And I know someone who's around the house who will just come down shortly and partake of the goodies. And what I'll do is serve them with some sliced tomato or a salad. And you can also, they're a great accompaniment for something like chicken or fish or a light meat, maybe a lamb or, whoops. Oh, here we go. As you can see, it's not a lot of work. It's just rolling them around in the butter. And the reason I'm not pouring it in there is because there's water in the bottom of this from the dumplings when I took them out of the pan. So we don't want to get that in here. We want the water off. So we're just rolling them in it, and they absorb just the right amount of herb butter. to be absolutely delicious. And in some circles, you might even add a sprinkle of red pepper flakes if you're so inclined. But I like the herb part, so I would probably sprinkle them with some more either dried rosemary or maybe some thyme and mix a little bit of the flavors in that way. And this is our little guy leftovers, and I'm just going to take out for now. Go. And I'm going to dump the water and get ready for my next batch. So there you have it, basically. Yum. Okay, let's put our next batch in. I have to tell you, my neighbors really like this because every time I do something like this where we have a lot, then they get fed. So it makes a wonderful gift for somebody, especially when they can't think of what to use to make to go with something if they're making whatever, whether it's steaks or fish or chicken. They're of course wonderful with chicken. And here we go. All right. And tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the rest of this, which is probably, I've got about, maybe a cup worth of dough left. I'm going to see how well it freezes. So next time we're on, if Dr. Jacqueline may have to remind me, but we'll find out how well it keeps in the freezer. Because I know that putting it in the refrigerator before we use it helps to make it a little firmer and a little easier to work with. But here we have them. They're great. You can see them. Okay, they're my unfrumply dumplings. And I am going to, again, pick out a small one because it's really hot and take a taste. I must say, they're pretty good cold, but they're absolutely delicious hot. So there we go. And you can see the next batch. I'll let you see how they look. And then okay. Just want to make sure they're rolling around there beautifully. Yep. As I say, if you want to use a melon baller or something like that to make them round, be my guest. That's perfectly wonderful. I just happen to like them freeform. And I think they cook very well this way. And so we'll just let those cook for a few more minutes. And I've got just about enough herb butter left to do the second batch. And so telling you what, I'm going to take a nice glass Pyrex bowl, something that can go in the freezer, and I'm going to take the batter that's left and put it in there, and we'll freeze it and see how well that works and see how well the timing on something like this. I can use this within a week. I'm sure it'll be fine. But we'll make sure and let you know next time. So if anybody has any comments or questions, please let me know. In the meantime, I wish you all a very healthy, happy, wonderful weekend, hearty appetite. And if anybody has questions, let's see what we have here. Wait a minute. Hello. Yes, I am Ricki Mckenna. Just to let you know again, this will go in the freezer. It almost looks like pesto, but we know it isn't. And I may have to mark it on top so I remember what's in there. I'm Ricki Mckenna. You can reach me at rickimckenna.net.com, or on Ricki's Kitchen. It's one word, RICKIS, kitchen.net. And if you want to text me, it's 970. Of course, if you're out of the country, it's 1-970-618-7607. And put Kitch in front of your text so I know where it's coming from. And I don't just go delete, because you don't want that to happen. I really do like to answer all your questions and hear your comments. It's very much appreciated because it helps me to put together the show in a form that people really enjoy. So again, my book is Yes, You Can Eat Well and Eat Right. And it is on Amazon. But if you want the spiral version, which is really the best one, you can get that directly from me. I will ship it to you. And just put Kitch in your email. If you're getting to me by email, it's Ricki at rickimckenna.com or rickiskitchen.net. So with that, we will check on the dumplings. See how this batch is doing. They're just about ready. That's so pretty. It's on a rolling boil, which is beautiful. And then when they're finished, they come out looking like this. And again, enjoy them by themselves. Enjoy them as an accompaniment to chicken, fish, meats, whatever you like. And have a marvelous weekend. And come join us again on USA Global TV next week. Thank you so much. Have a blessed weekend and hearty appetite.